Hello everyone and welcome back to our Python for Data Analysis course. My name is Eugene and I'll be taking you through the rest of this course. In the previous video we started looking at pandas data frames and pandas series, and we described a data frame. If you're an Excel user, a data frame will be similar to your Excel worksheet, which has rows and columns made up of different cells. And so the data frame is one of the most important data structures when it comes to data analysis in Python. And so in this video, we are going to start looking at how to select rows and ranges of rows and columns in a data frame. If you recall, we had a hospital appointments data, which had, information about different patients and then appointments that were scheduled and whether they showed up or not. And there are some other features in the data set which describe the patient. And so we read this CSV file into a pandas data frame and named it as the df underscore hospital appointments. That code is up here. We read the data frame, or the CSV file, I'm sorry, into a data frame using the pandas read CSV method. And so we have our data frame already loaded, and we're going to use the look or LOC method and then the iLook method to select rows and columns or ranges of rows and columns in the data frame. So we'll go ahead and start with the LOC method. Now the LOC method takes as input the row index range or the row label range or value, and then a comma and the column label range or value. Now, when I write it this way, the colon over here is telling me that select everything starting from the beginning all the way to the end for all the rows. Select everything from the beginning all the way to the end for all the columns. So when I run this, it gives me my whole data frame, which has about 110,000 records and then 14 different columns. Now, what if we wanted to select, for example, row labeled 2. Now, if you look at these bold numbers, these are the row labels or the indices. And then these are the column labels, the patient ID, appointment ID, gender, schedule day, and so on and so forth. And so, for example, if we wanted to select row 2's scheduled day, for example, what we will do is we'll have our df underscore hospital appointments .loc, and the row value that we want to select is row 2, and then the column is the scheduled day. And so if we run this cell, it gives us the 2016 429, this time. Now, what if we didn't want to select just one value and we wanted to select, for example, a range of values? So let's say we wanted to select row number 100 to 105, and then we didn't just want the scheduled day, but we wanted everything from patient ID all the way up to neighborhood. What we would do is still use the LOC function or the lock function, specify the label of the rows, that's row 100 to row 105, and then the column labels patient ID, colon neighborhood, so it will give us patient ID all the way through to neighborhood. And that gives us a subset of the data frame that we can work with. And so you can go ahead and experiment with different row labels and different column labels and then see what shows up. Now, if I wanted, for example, to select, say, from scholarship all the way to the end, what I would do is I would do scholarship. And if I wanted to go all the way to the end, rather than specifying, say, no show, I'll just do colon, and this tells Python that go all the way to the end. And so we have scholarship all the way to the end. If I wanted row 100 all the way to the end, I would just take the 105 out, and so the colon tells it that just go all the way to the end. So this gives me row 100 to row 110,526. Now, when you slice the data set this way, you can always save it or store it into a different variable and then work with that variable. Now, what if we wanted everything from the beginning up to row 100? And so we have a blank and then the column and then row 100. And let's say we wanted everything all the way up to, from the beginning all the way up to scholarship. And so we do the same thing over here. And that gives us, patient ID all the way up to scholarship. And then from row 0 all the way up to row 100. Now, the iLook method is pretty similar to the look method, but in this case, it does not use the labels of the rows and then the columns. It uses their indices. And the rows and the columns are 0 indexed, meaning that you start counting them from 0. And so patient ID will be column 0, appointment ID 1, gender is 2, and it goes on till the end. And so for the first cell of code, it's similar to the look method. If you put just the columns there, it will return the whole data frame. Now, what if we wanted to select the first cell? That is index 0, and then for the row, and index 0 for the column. That will give us the first patient ID. It's pretty straightforward. You put the index numbers there, and that gives you the patient ID in this cell. And we can do the same thing if we wanted to select, for example, the cell at location 44. So that is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that should give us this appointment day. And so we run it, and sure enough, it gives us the appointment day for this date. Now, what if we wanted to slice this data set? We wanted to take a range of values. Here is where it gets pretty interesting, because remember, this is a 0 indexed rows and then columns. And so let's say we wanted the first 4 rows or the first 5 rows. We'll write it as 0 colon 5. And remember, it's going to start 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that will give us the first 5 rows. So that means that the 5 is not inclusive. It's not going to add the row, like the row that is indexed 5. And then if we wanted the columns from the first 7 columns, it will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But then remember, we start counting from 0. And so it will be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so we specify it this way, and the ending part is not inclusive. And so we have our first 5 columns, and then the first 6, our first 5 rows, I'm sorry, and then the first 6 columns. All right, so what I'll suggest is spend some time and practice. There's people prefer look over iLook or iLook over look. It depends on which one you're most comfortable with when it comes to slicing your data set. And like I said, if you wanted to assign this to, say, another data frame which says first 4 or first 5 rows and 6 columns, you can always assign that, and then you can print what's in here, so that you've created a new data set based on a subset of the DF hospital appointments. In our next video, we're going to look at some basic plotting in Python. So we're going to look at using the plot method in the pandas data frames, and then when we're done with that, we're going to start looking again at filtering data, but this time with Boolean indices, so that we can select, different rows and columns based on conditions that we would set up. So I hope you enjoyed this section. Spend some time, read the documentation, do some more practice, and I'll see you next time.